Hello, everyone. My name is Sarah Zieth, and I am in the marketing department here at EnableMart. Thank you for joining us today and participating in our webinar with Linda Siciliano, President and CEO of Creative Speech Products. Linda has served children identified with special needs and their families for more than 35 years in both educational and clinical settings. In addition to her experience as a speech-language pathologist, Linda has worked as a special education and early intervention teacher, teacher of the deaf and hearing impaired, assistant principal, and principal. Today, Linda will be sharing with us her innovative new product, Teddy Talker, which is a unique multisensory teaching tool for articulation and connections to literacy. Before I turn the time over to Linda, I would like to review a few quick things about today's webinar. We will not be taking audio questions from the audience, but would like you to submit your questions via the questions interface in GoToWebinar. Linda is planning to take 45 minutes for her presentation, after which we will take the questions as they arrive. This webinar will be recorded and a link to it will be posted on enablemart.com after the webinar, as well as emailed to you for future playback. Everyone who attends today's webinar will receive a promo code at the end of the presentation for 15% off any Teddy Talker purchase at enablemart.com, and we will select one lucky winner at the end of the session to receive a free set of alphabet and mouth position cards from Linda. And with that, I will hand it off to Linda to start the presentation.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about Teddy Talker. We'll be learning about a kid-powered tool, an innovative tool for articulation and its connections to literacy. And today, we also will be learning about how Teddy Talker started. And of course, with every good bear story, it starts with once upon a time. And way back in 1984, I created Teddy Talker. You can see the original bear was felt and also fabric bear. And throughout the years, Teddy stayed with me as a concept to teach articulation to children. At a time when I became a principal, I realized that the children that we were serving that had speech and language problems often went on to have later problems with literacy. And so when I returned to being a speech pathologist, the next thing I did was connect Teddy with literacy. So let's take a look at this teaching tool. We're going to learn a little bit about Teddy today and how he can help children to make connections to print, as well as help in sound production. Here he comes. We can see that there's lots and lots of components to Teddy Talker. We'll learn today about the felt bear board. Here's the front of the board and the back of the bear board. We'll also learn about these manipulatives. It's a manipulative approach to teaching sound production, as well as connecting immediately to print. And so you'll see that these are some of the components of Teddy. And we also have our brand new Teach Together toolkit. I've just published this, which actually brings the classroom and the clinic and the home together with materials that will surround the child with experiences to make those visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic connections. And here are our mouth position cards. We'll learn about them in a little while. So let's take a closer look at why we constructed Teddy Talker. And Teddy Talker actually is based on the principle of construction. In fact, we know that children learn best when they are actually physically manipulating and playing, and that they construct their knowledge and understanding from concrete materials. And you can see that this child here is actually physically maneuvering manipulatives in order to produce the sound. And here the understanding is deeper when a child can transfer their knowledge in new contexts, when they are constructing. And so one of the principles of Teddy Talker is learning through construction. Another very basic principle, and something we probably know in our own practice or in our own classroom, is that if we teach someone else, we are much more likely to retain information. So if we practice by doing, perhaps we might learn as much as 75%. But if we teach someone else, we can retain up to 90% of what we have learned. So one of our goals with Teddy Talker is actually to teach Teddy about his sounds and his letters. And that's another basic principle of Teddy Talker. Another thing that I've centered Teddy around is the idea of collaborative learning, that the child and the adult are working together, and it's a for with by model, in that first we are doing it for the child, then we are doing it together with the child, and finally we're gradually releasing responsibility to the child to teach Teddy on his own. But there's always a pairing of the adult and the child, or a child with another child, and it works very well for several children or many children or a whole group, so children are learning together as well. So that's another basic operating principle of Teddy Talker. Now, if you're listening, most likely you have an interest in the idea of sound production and learning the sounds of language, and children can learn to manipulate sounds in language when activities and materials are engaging. So when I decided to create Teddy Talker way back when, I wanted to have something that children would love. And that has, no matter whether this is my new Teddy or the Teddy that I created years ago, the idea of a Teddy to teach is something that holds their interest, and learning should be fun. And let's talk a little bit more about what the research tells us about the learning needs of some of the children that we serve, because that's the most important thing in everything that we're going to talk about today. Is it's all about the children. Some of us may be working with children that are English language learners, and the research does say that if we use hands-on materials and modeling, as well as visuals, demonstrations, and gestures, that children that are English language learners will be more likely to be able to learn the information that we set out for them. Also, we want discussing and doing, and Teddy Talker is rich in the idea of talking out loud about what children are doing. And also making abstract concepts concrete. We want to be able to demonstrate things that are intangible. And as we are talking about how to make a sound, often we find that that could be somewhat abstract. So we'll show you today how Teddy Talker can actually help a child visualize sound production. And I'll also show you today how you can connect phonemes and graphemes right from your first lesson. In addition, we also know that children that are English language learners benefit when we've integrated listening, speaking, reading, and writing, and Teddy Talker does just that. If you are working with a child that has been identified with Down syndrome, there is some research that says that short-term memory deficits may exist for verbal information. However, one of the very exciting things that I find is that if we are using visuals and including reading in our work with children that may be identified with Down syndrome, that we are using a strong modality. So it is suggested in this book, Helping Children with Down Syndrome Communicate Better, that we pair seeing the letter with hearing the sound. And you will hear that throughout the presentation, this idea of the simultaneous pairing of the letter and the sound. And we believe that that strategy can make it easier for children to make that connection. If you happen to be working with a child who is suspected of childhood apraxia of speech or has been identified with childhood apraxia of speech, which is a motor planning disorder, one of the things that we know about important practice here is that we want not just single phonemes, which Teddy certainly works on that, but sequences of phonemes. And I will show you today how you can use the mouth position cards to sequence phonemes. And we want those phonemes to be increasingly complex. We also want a complete vowel inventory, and you'll find that the Teddy Talker does embed a lot of work on vowels. There are actually 38 sounds in the program. You'll also see as we do our demonstration that there's repetitive practice, multiple opportunities for the child to learn the sound by hearing it again and again in a fun way. And one of my favorite strengths, I would say, of Teddy Talker is this aspect of multisensory cues and feedback. This is a multisensory tool. It's something that gives the child visual, auditory, tactile, and kinesthetic cues. And beyond that, it also provides cognitive cueing. And when we think of cognitive cueing, that's a way to think about speech sounds, either through direct instruction or through association. So here, I'm highlighting for you the letter S. This is the back of the letter S card. And you can see there's a little poem on the back of every card that embeds the placement for the sound. You can see that Teddy smiles. That's what you would see Teddy doing as air tickles down his tongue. That's a cognitive cue. And we call the S the snake sound. That's the association. And this is from How to Treat Childhood Apraxia of Speech. In addition, we also know that children that have childhood apraxia of speech may experience some particular difficulties in letter sound matching, in rhyming, in segmentation and blending of initial and final consonants, sequencing of letters, and rapid automatic naming tasks. And these are things that throughout the program, you'll see that these skills are actually a part of the Teddy Talker approach. Now, we want to make early connections to print. And the reason that we want to do that is that there's compelling evidence that a young child's alphabetic knowledge and phonological awareness can predict proficiency in later reading and writing. So these are two key research findings for us to concentrate on: alphabetic knowledge and phonological awareness. And these are also present in Teddy Talker. And if we directly teach phonological awareness, a child is more likely to be successful, as well as letter sound correspondences. And in the letter sound relationships, a child's ability to produce letter sounds can increase dramatically when they know the letter names. So that's another great reason to think about phoneme-grapheme correspondence from a very early stage of learning. Some of us may be SLPs working out in with the expectations of the Common Core in a school setting. And if you are, you can see that some of the things that have been suggested as part of our role, if you are an SLP, is to help with the implementation of the Common Core and ensure that IEP goals are matched with the curriculum expectations and the demands of the classroom, and also to focus on the language underpinnings of the Common Core. If you are working in another setting, in a general education setting, in the classroom, then you might be working closely with an SLP as well. The Common Core here, there are many, many objectives that Teddy might meet in terms of the Common Core. I've listed them for you, but some of the primary ones might be to recognize and name upper and lowercase letters of the alphabet and isolate and pronounce the phonemes in single-syllable words. And we're also working on long and short sounds of the 5 major vowels. And there's Teddy, who wants to learn letters and sounds together. And here he is. We did see that at the beginning that Teddy is a felt bear board. And here we're going to get a close-up view of Teddy at the front of the board. And the articulators which are physically manipulated to create the sound. We're actually physically going to construct the sound. And we'll learn a little bit more about what this bow tie is for in a few minutes. We'll also see that the back of the bear board, if you were to turn Teddy around, it would look like this on the back. So this is the front, this is the back, and the back actually shows what happens behind Teddy's teeth. It's meant to unlock the mystery of what the tongue is actually doing inside Teddy's mouth. There we have the tongue, and there's a puppet tongue that you can use to manipulate your hand and demonstrate how sounds are produced, as well as put it on the child's hand as well. And let's take a look at some letters. We're going to learn about the letter P, which makes the P sound, and how I usually start this lesson, and of course everyone can make this their own. I usually start by placing the letter P somewhere in Teddy's face. He might have a little Teddy voice and say, oh, I've got a letter P someplace on my head, and we might talk about the fact that it's on his forehead. Teddy is thinking about the letter P making the sound, and all the children touch their forehead as well and make the sound. And you can see that at the same time, I also put out the mouth position card as a frame of reference. We're moving the letter around. The children can tell me where to move that letter. They can tell me, for example, to put it on his cheek or on his chin or on his nose. Let's take a look at some of the places it can travel. And as we're doing that, we're also making the sound. So we're all, at this point, we're saying the letter P is on Teddy's mouth. It makes the p sound, and we're actually putting our hands on our mouth. So we're also working on his mouth, our mouth, and feeling how that sounds as the letter P travels around the bear board. So that's the first component. He's saying it with his mouth, and he's also listening to the sound that the letter P makes. So we also are using the senses as well. So after that felt letter travels around the board, we are selecting the correct articulators, in this case the correct mouth position pieces that will enable us to make the P sound. And we are actually making the sound in the air. The adult is making the sound and showing the children that the lips move together and talking and describing that movement and demonstrating that on the bear board. In addition, the children will take turns to do the same thing. So the mouth, after the demonstration and modeling, the child will have a turn, or the children will have a turn. Each one will have a turn to make the sound, push the lips together and pop, and then teach Teddy a sound by placing the lips in the correct position on the bear board. And you can see here that this is actually our first cue for some of the features of sounds, because in this particular case, Teddy's sound for P is windy, and this is a physical felt piece of, we call them cues, and you can pop that, pop, 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 and take turns popping the air with the windy cue. In addition, you'll notice his bow tie is red. That's the second part of our cueing system, and that, when his motor is off for voiceless sounds, Teddy's bow tie is red. Let's take a look at what happens next. We've added some cues here, and there's your red bow tie, of course, that comes with the bear board. And here I've added another component, and that's our speech bubble. So we're doing some conventions of print here. And when the P is outside of the speech bubble, I refer to it as a letter. When it goes inside the speech bubble, we say it's the sound. And finally, Teddy thanks his friends for teaching him about the sound that the letter P makes, and he always ends each lesson with a happy smile. So children have different jobs. You can see that it's something that you could give a child to do to actually manipulate the lip positions, but as well to put the speech bubble in the right spot and Generally, they love making Teddy so happy. They're such great teachers. Let's go on to the letter M. The same idea applies to where the M is moving around the bare board. And as you'll notice, if you take a good look at this card, the lips are together in the same manner as the P. So we need to know that there are some distinctive features of the M. And of course, we're putting the lips together and saying at the same time. So let's move on to see the third tier of the cueing system. Take a good look here at what cues we need to add to Teddy. And I'm sure you noticed that his bow tie is green. So to turn his voice on, which is voiceless, was voiceless and is now voiced, to turn his voice on, we add that green bow tie. And in addition, there's something else on his nose, and that happens to be honey. And the poem says, eating honey that he's found, Teddy hums the sweetest sound. Lips together, there's a cue, it's yummy. With a paw on his nose, with a tickle sound goes, he rubs his nose, and he rubs his cute tummy. And so the children rub their noses, and they actually are getting some feedback that it's a nasal sound. And here we have the speech bubble as before, and one happy bear that's learning about the letter M as well. And so now let's look at another sound. This is the letter S. You can see that once again we're using our mouth position card to give us a framework for the articulators, and it's a windy sound, voice is off, and so very similar, exactly the same procedure as you saw in the first two sounds. But now, because there is so much movement that's required with the tongue to give distinction to the sound, you can see that we turn the board over. We may not do that in the first lesson, but when the children are ready, we turn the board over, and now we're taking a peek inside Teddy's mouth. So we put the tongue on our hand, and we can demonstrate, and here's the poem. Teddy's friend named Sis is very long as she slithers on the ground. He smiles, that was on the front of the bare board, as air tickles down his tongue. And now we demonstrate the movement of the air. When we say down the tongue, we actually can show it, and the child, if the child is wearing the puppet tongue, the child can actually feel that feedback. So we do that movement, and there's another cue in here. I didn't know if you noticed that it says he hisses her soft snake sound. So there's another cue, hissing, which would give the idea of what to do to make the sound. And that's our snake sound. So just to review quickly, we do introduce the letter-sound relationship. We are articulating the sound and describing the movement. We are showing what we do to actually physically construct the sound, and we guide the child to teach Teddy with us first, and then independently. At the end of the lesson, we always review the letter and sound relationship, and we give the child concrete feedback about what they did well. Some things I want to point out here about that process. Number one, we are constantly focusing on the articulator and the letter names, and I hope that you were able to see that in that demonstration, because they're the only moving parts in Teddy Talker. In addition, it gives us the opportunity to slow our speech down, so we can use slow, clear speech models, which is very important in working with some of the children that may need a little bit more time. In addition, we also have the chance to have what is called focused stimulation. We're producing target sounds frequently by the auditory model, the visual model. If you notice, while they're in the air, we're saying the sound. We're identifying the letter and saying the sound, and so on. So lots and lots of opportunities for repetition of that sound. And as one child passes it to the next, passes the manipulatives to the next child, there's multiple repetitions of each sound. And Again, you noticed that there's a multi-tier cueing system. In addition, there's also a bumpy ridge for the target above the teeth for those sounds where the tongue needs to touch above. And we can actually show what that means. And now it's a chance for you to see if you could maybe take a guess about what these cards are, mouth position cards. And here I'm going to show you, we're going to model just at first, taking a look. This is the W and the little poem that goes with it. You can see the lip rounding there, and I'm looking at the bow tie, so I know that this is a sound that's voiced. Let's see if you can take a look at this letter. And also I want to point out that the mouth position cards can also be used for highlighting the actual, they are dry erasable, so you can highlight the shape of the mouth. You can also pay attention to the letter. You can highlight letters. So they're very versatile. So it's going to take a look at this mouth position card and see if you can guess this sound. And you can see that it's a green bow tie. And did you guess that it was coming, letter B? There's our poem. Here's our cues in this one. And you get to learn through your mouth position cards, you'll get to learn a lot about Teddy's family and friends and what he likes to eat and what he plays with. And so here's his cousin Baby Bear. Baby Bear's learning to say his name by putting his lips together and bouncing. This is the bouncing sound, Baby Bear's bouncing sound. Here comes the next one. You can see that it's a windy sound. Look at the mouth position, and it's voiceless. And did you guess that this one was the letter F, making the F sound? Okay, and here's your cues. Of course, he's a bear. Teddy's a bear. He loves porridge. So we put some porridge on his bottom lip. He's tasting it with top teeth. He takes a breath. There's your cue. Scrapes and blows till his lip feels cool beneath. So that's our warm porridge sound. Here's another sound. This one has a voice and nice and round. I'm guessing you might have thought already that it is the letter O, making the O sound. Teddy is oh so surprised. And here's your cue, like his lips, it's round. There are a number of different representations of the letter O. This happens to be one of them. Okay, we have lots of long and short vowels in our mouth position cards. Here's another one. There are two possible answers for this, but we're going to use our mouth position, the back of our mouth position cards to see which one it is. Okay, and it could have been CH, but it's the SH sound. There's the wind, and it is voiceless, but the key here is quiet breath down the middle of his tongue, like the stream. His lips are pushed out wide, and a sound blows for quiet outside. So, we also learned that he lives in a forest as well. So that gives you a sample of some of the mouth position cards. Here's the last one, and the tongue is starting to rise in the back on this sound. So take a look. There are a number of possibilities for this sound, and this happens to be the letter G. We have a voice on that, and here's your tongue goes back, noisy air comes out. Baby Bear's learning a lot of skills. This time he's learning to sip from a cup. So this is our gulping sound. And each one of these mouth position cards has a name, an association with it. Okay, let's take we have some sound blending that we can do with the cards. Remember before I mentioned that you can sequence the cards. Here we have sound blending, and there's a card that helps us with that. You can use this if you are an SLP. You can certainly use this for cluster reduction, showing missing sounds. You can physically construct the sound that's missing. You can write in on the card the letter names. In addition, another thing that I do frequently, I'm working right now in an early intervention program, and I do use these cards with both typically developing children. It's an integrated setting, typically developing children and children with needs. And they love the idea of putting cards together so that if we want to make the word on, that we might move the cards together to actually show the sequence of sounds. And I do use this for sound sequencing. If we're working with rotating vowels, a sequence of vowels through, I just keep changing the vowels and keeping the consonants the same. So you can use these to sequence sounds. You can also show segmentation of sounds on the bare board. Obviously, you're going to do that by listening to rhyming words and making those changes. But for some children, they may need to make it more visible. So here we've changed man to fan just by changing the lip positions. And we can use our felt pieces to actually spell those words. Before we met Teddy, and we learned quite a bit about his life. We know what he looks like by looking at the bare board. We know what he likes by listening to his preferences in his poems. We find out where he lives. We also find out who's in his family and who are his friends. And we can also ask this question about why Teddy wants to learn his letters and sounds. We can see evidence that he's a happy bear. And why is he so happy about that? How does he feel when he learns them? So there's a graphic organizer in the toolkit for your use. And this is a way to collect information. It's also a wonderful literacy tool, a graphic organizer that can help you learn all about Teddy and organize children's thinking. In addition, another component to Teddy Talker is the Teddy Talker alphabet. And now that we've seen some of the mouth position cards, you can see that they have been assembled in alphabet format. And the reason I developed this was that often we say to children, well, let's get our mouths ready for a certain sound. And sometimes it's hard for a child to know when they look at the letter P. It's really hard for them to know, well, what does that mean when I get my mouth ready for the letter P? So I created this chart not to replace the traditional alphabet, but to work in conjunction with the alphabet. And you can have some fun with this by covering up one of the letters and seeing if the child can remember what Teddy's face looks like, trying to make that sound. You also can write the letter on the little sticky. Sticky works really well. And then you can take that off to see if you've made a match. So there are concrete suggestions for the alphabet in the Teddy Talker School to Family resource called the Teach Together Toolkit, which is a brand new publication. And this publication is 318 pages, and it's really designed to make that complete connection between the home and the school, and also perhaps the therapist and the classroom. And it certainly can be used in clinical settings as well. There are 3 sections to the Teach Together Toolkit. You'll get a chance to meet Teddy. There are what I call tool pages. They're really not worksheets. They're activity pages designed for a home helper or a school helper to work together with a child, and then resources that are general resources for everyone. So let's look at the Meet Teddy component to the Teach Together Toolkit. And everything that you have seen in the bare board is also in the toolkit, so that if you've demonstrated something with the felt manipulatives, at the beginning I said it's a kid-powered tool. Now the child has another chance to be able to use manipulatives in a hands-on way for practice. Everything in the toolkit, by the way, is black and white and fully copy ready, so that you can send this home or use it in the classroom. You also have the flexibility with this I work with students for which I need to enlarge materials, and this can easily be enlarged. So the Meet Teddy section comes with a complete set of manipulatives. These are all numbered on the back so that it makes it easy to know number 1, number 2, and so on, so that you'll see a little bit later that each letter, each sound has directions on how to make it, and we refer to the numbers, so there's no guesswork involved. There's a lesson on meeting Teddy with the front of the bear face, and there's also the second lesson or another lesson where you have the back of the bear board, as well as you're going to make, in this toolkit, a paper bag tongue. So that's the paper bag version of the felt tongue that you saw. And then I think the neat thing about using that is not only is it cost effective, but children can color that, as you'll see a little bit later. There's also the cues that children will color. They'll color one bow tie red and one bow tie green so that they can place them on the teddy board. So let's move to the Teach Together tool pages. There's interactive writing on every page. And here's the first page. It's build and say. So now, as I said to you before, if you notice there are numbers here, it will tell you exactly what number pieces to use to build this picture. It tells you what cues to use, and it tells you what you might need at some point in time to for the back of the bear board. In addition, there's a see and say. We see the sound, and there's a description of exactly what to do to teach the child how to make the sound. And I tried to use kid language for that so that it would be very easily understood by the children. In addition, we have trace and say. Notice everything is and say because our goal is to connect the sound with all these modalities. So our vision, our construction, kinesthetic, and tracing. Here we go. We're going to trace the letter and say the sound at the same time. And at the end of every sheet, you can see that there's a space for, right here, for the adult and the child to interactively write together. Interactive writing is a really strong way to connect your print with sound. So if I were writing mom, I would stretch those words out and write it here, and if the child's name was Anna, I would stretch it out. And every single lesson, we're working on name recognition as well. This is a rhyme and say, so here we're working on rhyming words, and we're writing those rhyming words. So the focus on this one is the rhyming. And the next one is writing and say, write and say, and you can see those speech bubbles again. Just like we did on the bear board, on this sheet, we're going to write letters somewhere on Teddy. We'll be working on spatial terms and writing them in the speech bubbles. And we're doing movement here. So this one is do and tell. So you're actually using this. That's what your paper bag tongue will look like. And you're actually step by step using the back of the bear board, or the back of Teddy's teeth, as we call it in the toolkit. And it has little pictures of what to do for each of the sounds that uses the tongue in a very important way. Here's the next one. This is drawing and visualizing. So now we're working at the sound at the level of the word, and these are beginning sounds. We're actually drawing pictures of beginning sounds with the child. Here we're drawing the mouth position, and these are generics, by the way. What you saw before, each of the 38 sounds has those sheets that you've seen in the previous slide, so that there's at least 5 activities for every sound, possibly 6 if the tongue is involved. And then there's generic tool pages. The generics are used for every sound. So think of the possibilities that you have here to continue to expand practice. So we're actually drawing what this sound is doing. We're telling Teddy's mouth what to do for the sound. And here we're drawing, saying, and writing. So we draw a picture like we did before with beginning sounds and words, and then we actually write the word underneath. So there's more interactive writing in that one. Lots of descriptive language. This one is called do and tell. For a do and tell, this allows you to customize exactly what you'd like the child to do with their tongue for specific activities or perhaps for practice. Here is color and tell, and here you have the child color different parts of the tongue that might be relevant to the sound, but first by feeling the tongue inside their own mouth and talking about what that tongue is doing and describing the movement. So we are certainly using our language skills across the board here. Now, as we said in our opening, when we talked about the research, we looked at the importance of phoneme identity, segmentation skills, and alphabetic knowledge. And the Teach Together Toolkit does have generic pieces that work on phoneme identity. Where here we're listening and touching. If we hear the sound once, we touch one honey jar. If we hear it twice, we touch two, and so on. Three times we touch three. We're listening for sound sequences in this one. And there are alphabetic themes that are also embedded. So these can be used for any sound. Here's some sound blending sheets. And we're adding sounds together. We put a little formula to have the child color the sheet yellow plus blue to make it green, and showing how working on clusters of sounds will give us a third sound. And a good example of that is when you're working on the letter Q. It actually has two discrete sounds, the k and the w, and the child gets to see that in a number of ways. They can visualize it from the pictures, or they can visualize the writing of the letter Q in these boxes. And here we have some work on R-controlled vowels or vocalic R by doing things like ear, actually showing how the combinations of vowels and R work together. So another important aspect of this is formative assessment. There is an assessment in the toolkit. You'll be able to pre- and post-test Teddy sounds, and you can either do it by child or by date. So there's assessment in there, and there's also lots of information for classroom teachers. There's a lesson plan from start to finish. There's a goal-setting tool page and that graphic organizer that we talked about. And for families, there are letters that go home to families and ideas that they can use to develop the alphabet. So these are the last thing I want to talk about are the building blocks. These are summary pages for families that actually show the picture. They summarize what the letter is, the sound, what pieces it uses, and also a little bit about the cues that you need in order to produce the sound. And they're organized by early, middle, and late developing consonants as well as vowels. So that basically gives us an overview. We've seen a lot about sound production, but just as a reminder, throughout the program there's lots of ways to build lexical knowledge, and hopefully you've seen some of these in action as I demonstrated different parts of the program. Teddy is something that you can use across settings, whether it's for whole group lessons, targeted small group lessons, intensive individual lessons with children, and not just settings across a school or a clinic, but in addition, we can work closely with families, which is something that's so important in our work. And finally, today we learned that Teddy uses auditory, visual, tactile, and kinesthetic cues, as well as cognitive cues, that if we teach other people, the rate of information can be 90%. You may remember that there's lots of hands-on materials and demonstrations and making things concrete for our English language learners, as well as the integration of language skills. And as you look through here, for apraxia, we're using phoneme sequencing, repetitive practice, and our multisensory cueing, as well as giving the child feedback. The two predictors I wanted to highlight, alphabet knowledge and phonological awareness. That's really important as we're working with young children. Child's ability to produce letter sounds might help them as they know letter names. And you saw lots of ways to connect phonemes and graphemes, hopefully from your very first lesson. Lots of connections with Teddy Talker materials. And at this point in time, I'd like to know if you might have any questions for me. I'd be most happy to answer them. And the last thing, of course, is that learning should be great fun. So I hope that you have had an opportunity to learn a little bit more about Teddy, and that you can visualize the fun that you might have with a tool like this.